Welcome to Me, Myself and Mind. We're a wellbeing company that specialises in society's mental and physical wellbeing. These podcasts are designed to cover an array of different topics and subjects within the umbrella of wellbeing, having real and in-depth conversations with guest speakers to uncover their experiences, their knowledge, and to provide us with the insights that we can use to improve our own lifestyle and health. In this episode, we are joined by Stephen Blunston, an ex-Special Forces soldier with 10 years of military experience under his belt. During this time in the Special Forces, he was deployed in Afghanistan, Africa and many other areas of the Middle East. After leaving the forces, he joined an international disaster response charity, Rescue Global, which responded to natural and man-made disasters worldwide. Along this, he also completed a master's degree to prove to himself that he could fit in with the social norms of today's society, which he soon discovered wasn't for him. He is now working for himself, developing property and building wealth for private investors, while simultaneously balancing time with his young family. With all this said, we are going to be discussing how all of these experiences, some being more challenging than others, have not only impacted him, but also shaped and developed his mindset to where he is today. So, Steve, I'd like to first start by thanking you for coming on to the podcast. And, you know, if there's anything that I missed out there or there's anything that you'd like to go into more detail with, then carry on.
Cheers, guys. Thanks for having me on. So thanks for that awesome introduction. Sometimes, you know, it's quite difficult for me to speak about kind of the kind of things that I've done in the past. And obviously I know we've kind of spoke of that personally as well prior to this. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think we're probably going to go into some quite good kind of gory and positive and negative detail kind of throughout the rest of this talk, to be honest. But I guess for me, obviously I've certainly known Nick for quite some time now. So I think it was from 2007, Nick.
Yeah, we go back some years. I think
maybe
like 14, 15 years.
Yeah, maybe 2006.
Yeah.
So for me, kind of everything kind of really came to a head after I'd been. So I left school at 16, as everybody does, and then I got an apprenticeship as a mechanic for a few years. And to be honest, it was a job that I actually really enjoyed doing. But I got to a time when I was kind of 19 or 20, and I guess I wanted something else out of life. And I had quite a good friend at the time, Lee, guy who's still my good friend now. And yeah, after a bit of a wild night, we made a bit of a drunken bet, to be honest. A bit of a drunken pact, I guess, that we're going to both join the army together.
Yeah.
And kind of that's kind of then really how I met Nick. Mm-hmm. I decided that I was going to join the parachute regiment, so the training for that is quite grueling and intense, and I realised that, to be honest, I probably wasn't quite fit enough, and so Nick was, to be honest, the first personal trainer who I came across on the internet, and that's where Nick comes in, really.
Thanks for that. Yeah, so I proceeded then to put Steve through a training program, physically and mentally. And it was quite demanding, you know, for you and myself at times, you know. We did a lot of training outdoors, didn't we? Cold weather training in the streams, you know, for a period of time. And I think I used to say, it's got to be nasty, Nick. You know, I can't be polite through the training, because when you actually get to your regiment, obviously it's going to be pretty tough. So
yeah, I mean, some of the stuff that we did, you know, when we first started having our kind of physical training sessions that were a couple of times a week, you know, I'd not really done, other than, you know, personal training off my own steam, I'd not really done anything. You know, I certainly hadn't joined the army by this point, but definitely some of the stuff that we were doing, but not only the physical training, but also kind of the mindset training. That was kind of really what I think really started to kind of give me the edge.
I think obviously with the mental training side of it, because we used hypnotherapy and visualisation techniques, didn't we?
Yeah.
Do you remember a little bit about that?
Oh, I certainly do, yeah. So for me personally, the thing that I always remember that had the biggest impact on, I guess, the biggest kind of oomph for me to get through training was the visualisation. Yeah. So, you know, we did some really crazy stuff, as you kind of briefly spoke about. You know, there was lots of kind of jumping in and out of rivers on a cold Sunday morning whilst the kind of five-a-side team that were on the pitch next to us were kind of like laughing and joking, and they kept constantly seeing us every week.
Thought we were insane.
Well, at the time it felt right, but looking back now, definitely giggle about it, that's for sure. But doing that kind of time and time again, built up that mental robustness as well. But yeah, so with regards to the visualization, I remember we'd been into it by a few months, and to be honest, Nick, I think I'm probably right in saying this is when you really started to practice it a little bit more seriously. It was still quite new at the time, I think. I think I remember you saying. And we did an awful lot of visualization where I was visualizing myself being past that maroon beret from passing P Company effectively, and passing the P Company course. And we'd do it when, I remember we'd do it when we were sat in nice calm environments, kind of at home. But you'd also stop me halfway through one of our kind of really quite grueling PT sessions. And try to calm things down, and you'd be like, right, let's just visualize why are you doing this right now? And that, we did that so many times that it just meant that it just left a physical imprint on kind of my mind.
On the body and mind.
Yeah, so it's like muscle memory. When I then joined the army and started the training, and although you weren't necessarily there, my mind constantly reverted back to that when times got hard.
I mean, that's the big thing with sport and sort of arduous training like that. It is the mental rehearsal that gets people through, doesn't it? And we sort of began with the end in mind. You saw the reward, and we just worked towards that. The more you saw, heard, and felt that, with the visualization and the hypnotherapy techniques, and knew that, and also with your physical capabilities, it just went hand in hand. The mind led the body, and the body led the mind.
I mean, I always, and I think I'll certainly go into this a bit later on, but. I never classed myself as being one of the most fittest, or certainly not the most strongest guys by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, I'll probably say I was more than likely one of the weakest. It was just kind of what you have up there that I think really did give me the edge. On top of what some of the other guys out there who, I guess there's. I'm certainly not a big guy, but. Certainly a lot of guys on day one, week one, when we started training, and you start eyeing them up, and they're big guys, and you think, God, if anybody's going to pass, it's going to be them, and it ends up being the opposite.
And that's the thing; it's not judging a book by its cover. Again, it's the whole mindscape that the mind drives the muscle anyway. It doesn't matter how big the muscle is; it's the mind that ultimately says, "Climb that rope." As you said, I think you did log carries, didn't you?
Yeah.
Do you want to tell us about one of those situations with the log carry? Somebody give up, dropped it, and you carried on?
Oh, yeah. Well, I think we've spoke about this probably a number of times, to be honest, Nick. But for the listeners, it's one of the actual P Company events, a log race.
Okay.
So P Company is effectively one of the last weeks that you do as part of the parachute regiment training. And at the end of it, you basically earn your maroon beret. So it's a week of really quite grueling.
Intense.
Yeah, there's about 7 or 8 events, and as I say, one of them's called the log race, and it's for a couple of miles, and you're basically carrying a telegraph pole, and with a rope around it. There's a team around you. I think you start with about eight guys, and I think by the end of ours there was kind of 3 or 4 left, and the guy in front of me had dropped off, the guy behind me had dropped off, and it's there's only one place for you to go when you're in that kind of a mindset, and it's back to that visualization. That is the thing where you just seeing that. It's like mind, it's that muscle memory, but mind muscle memory, if that is even a thing.
Keeps you going. So that helped you, and then you obviously got you got into the parachute regiment, and then you went to Afghanistan, and then obviously you went on to the Special Forces. So let's start with that. What was the reason that you wanted then to go on to the Special Forces? Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So I never personally requested to join the Special Forces. I got asked by my chain of command at the time whether or not I wanted to go for the program, for the course. And basically what happened was, because all throughout this, I guess with any people's parents, you know, they'd never want them to join the military, and my parents certainly never wanted me to join. However, they were very supportive of any decision that I ever made.
And your dad certainly was, wasn't he?
Yeah, he definitely was. And I know you've met my dad more than a handful of times. And he was, as I say, so he was massively supportive. So basically, when it came to the Special Forces, I got asked if I wanted to do the selection course, and I was a little bit apprehensive at the time. But I think I remember speaking to yourself, and I kind of, even though it had been nearly kind of 4 or 5 years since you'd helped me to pass the parachute regiment course when I went for Special Forces selection, you know, I still had that. It was ingrained in my mind even still then. It still is now. So I guess the reason as to why I went for it was I'd got a bit stale, I guess, where I was. Not that it was easy by any stretch of the imagination, but I was always looking for that kind of next challenge. And certainly at the time, you know, my dad was believing in absolutely everything that I was doing. And unfortunately, on the night before I was due to start my first attempt at the Special Forces training, he surprisingly passed away when he was living in Dubai. You know, bags were packed, it was good to go, and we had a knock at the door, and it was his best friend telling us that he'd passed away in Dubai. So, you know, needless to say, I didn't go on that, but you know, that then certainly gave me the edge to really kind of start pushing boundaries at my next kind of attempt at Special Forces selection, because this was in about roughly January 2010.
So I mean, you must have had that in your mind, in the back of your mind, that you told your dad that this is something that you wanted to do, and you know, unfortunately he was no longer here to witness it, but you told him that's what you were doing.
He was, you know, like any dad would be, you know, he was researching everything that I was about to do. He was asking me questions about it. You know, he was a relatively young guy, not necessarily healthy. You know, he kind of liked the drink and had smoked, you know, way too many cigarettes throughout his life. He was quite a big guy, but you know, he was 55. You know, when he passed away, but he was you know, life and soul of the party. He was so chuffed and so pleased, like with kind of what I was doing and what I was about to get myself into. You know, he was kind of fully read in on it. You know, he'd researched every element and was excited for me.
And that must have given you the drive to then, you know, when you've got somebody so close to you believing in you like that, that must have, you know, ignited something else in your mind, you know, to push you forward.
Yeah. So obviously I didn't start that pre-selection program because it was due to start literally the following morning. So instead, you know, I started six months later after, you know, we kind of sorted everything out and kind of started to get back on our feet. So I ended up doing this course that started in the July. And that was interesting.
So you know, what was selection program like? You know, could you talk us through a few of the challenges that you faced, and how long was it? And you know, could you go into a little bit more detail?
Yeah, of course. So this Special Forces selection program that I went for is basically a Special Forces communicator course. So it's quite a technical role. You know, I guess it's probably a little bit geeky. You know, but. And that's what I liked, you know. I was kind of very hands-on with kind of bits and pieces, you know, kind of very technically minded, always like taking stuff apart and putting it together. Effectively, you know, I was kind of the radio operator, basically, you know. So the program course, the selection course itself lasted for basically 6 months. And there's at least a handful of phases. You know, they're a mixture of kind of physical and mental. You know, and they can basically start with quite a grueling, pretty much a month on the hills in the Brecon Beacons. You know, where you just kind of on your own and left to your own devices with just yourself and your mind to wander off with. And that's quite an interesting time, and that always goes back to that visualization that, you know, we initially did. I honestly, at the time, looking back even now, felt like I was virtually indestructible.
Yeah.
It was untouchable.
Even when you were
because of
looking
that
at those,
visualization.
even when you were looking at those that were, you would perceive as much fitter, much stronger.
Don't get me wrong. The Hills program was horrendous, absolutely horrendous.
Yeah.
I had sores on my back. I had a really bad skin infection. On the last march that we did. That's effectively 64 kilometers, and you're wearing £100 worth of equipment. And this is after you've been on the hills for like basically a month.
Yeah.
This is the last thing. I was not exactly in a great physical shape, but managed to get through it, and unfortunately passed that phase, and ultimately passed the whole of the program. But
yeah,
I guess there were a lot of different phases of the selection program. Some of them are physical, some of them much more mental.
Yeah.
Than others, and I think certainly some of the more mental elements is, I guess, really where I felt like I kind of came into my own.
Yeah.
I guess at the time I probably didn't really know it, but looking back now, it all makes sense. It all makes much more sense to me.
Yeah.
That it was that visualization and the kind of meditation and everything that we initially did with Nick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's fantastic. I mean, it just shows the power of the subconscious mind. If you've got that built-in, programmed in, you just will not stop. You'll just keep going, as you said. And just a quick question on that: that was in the summer months, was it?
Yeah.
Was it red hot?
Certainly was. I think I lost at least 2 stone. At least 2 stone, and by the end of it, I had kind of sores on my. I've never been skinny. I've never been slim.
Yeah.
I've always had a little bit of excess chub, and by the end of it, I was cut to bits.
Really?
My back, Fortunately, the other guys kind of helping me physically to take my back up kind of every day. But yeah, it was not a pretty sight at all. And finished it by I've got some pictures actually of when I went out on that last weekend after the hills, and you can see all my bone cheeks, and it looked like a skeleton. Lost so much weight in such a short period of time.
Yeah. So it's really pushing you to the limits.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But as I say, it's not only the physical, but also the mental with selection. Certainly when it goes into other phases such as the escape and evasion and the interrogation phase as well. And obviously, it's all kind of publicised now by what Ant Middleton's doing with his SAS Who Dares Wins.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's a much more kind of condensed version, and they change it slightly for TV. But it's kind of there or thereabouts.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah,
there was one stage, wasn't there? You were talking about when you were in the woods and you escaped and you came across a group. Were they bickering? Was it a bit toxic?
Yeah, so we so basically the way the escape and evasion works is you basically get released with a kind of your team of guys, and you've got a few days to reach a couple of checkpoints, but you've got it's like a grand game of hide and seek, if you like. You've got some guys literally chasing you down, and they're soldiers as well. And it basically means that every night you are almost split up from the rest of the guys that you go out on patrol with, because the hunter force is effectively on you. So much so I physically got grabbed one night by one of the hunter force guys, and we had a little bit of a kind of kerfuffle. Fell away from each other. I jumped straight into a river because I thought, well, I've got much more to lose than what you have. I think they get gifted like a long weekend if they capture somebody who's on selection.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, I've got if you capture me, the potential is failure.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, I'm more than happy to get wet.
Yeah.
So I jumped into the river, ran back the way from where we'd come from, and then jumped into another chap who was on the selection program as well. Somebody who was certainly not in my team.
Yeah.
We face to face spooned the whole night.
Yeah.
It was so cold.
Oh, it was freezing. But I'd found like a Hessian sack that was in a farm, and to be honest, that was pretty warm. To be honest.
Yeah.
But all you can do at the time, is laugh.
Yeah.
Because all you can do at the time is laugh. But again, it's back to that visualization all the time. It's having that. I guess I got to a stage with the visualization where it was almost kind of
second nature.
Yeah, it was second nature, but it was becoming to a point where it was almost like, dare I say it, not taking anything away from you at all, Nick, but it was almost get to the point where it was self-taught.
Yeah.
Because obviously there'd been quite a long periods of time where I hadn't actually been able to have a session with Nick.
Yeah.
So I had to like learn it for myself, learn how to go through the system myself, and I guess that's the whole point of the visualization anyway.
That's the point of the program again with any program or coaching or anything like that to improve yourself. It's not to be dependent, because in the end it's built in and you take it and put your style on it. And use it. I'm going to ask a question about the training, because I think you mentioned, was there a point where you were kept awake for 48 hours and then you had to do a presentation?
Yeah, there's lots of different parts of the kind of selection program. Sorry, and I can't remember what the name of this one's called, but I when I was on selection, I was quite a junior soldier, and I was out of my comfort zone. A lot of the other guys who go for this kind of comms, the more technical aspects of the Special Forces Communications course, they're already involved in that area, and me coming in from like the parachute regiment, it was completely new to me. I had really very little experience in that area, but it's everything. The same thing is still expected of you.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. They don't care about your past. They don't care about rank. They don't care about your past experience. They expect the same thing. So basically, one of the courses is one of the programs or the schedules is for you've basically kept awake the whole weekend. It's like Friday morning to Sunday. I get that right? Friday morning to Monday morning.
Yeah.
Kept awake the whole weekend, and you've got to plan this operation, and then on that Monday morning you present it in front of like 100 odd people, 150 odd people, and you get absolutely slated for it throughout the whole presentation. Obviously you've had no sleep, you get probably loads of bloody stuff wrong, and you just get hammered for it. But it's all about how you put yourself across and how confident you are about it. If you do something wrong, then fine, so be it, but you've got to be confident in what you're saying and what you're projecting. You can't stutter your words. It's all about that perception.
And how do you feel that sleep deprivation, messed with your mentality?
Again, it really just come back to that kind of visualization. Don't get me wrong, the sleep deprivation is, it's bloody hard.
Yeah.
But it's. I guess it's a course. You go back to that. It's a course. It's going to end at some point. It can't go on forever. Don't get me wrong. There's people who have unfortunately passed away on doing various elements of selection. But it's a course. It's going to finish at some point. It's not going to. It's So
would you say that you have to keep reminding yourself this along the way?
Yeah, like. You're doing it for a reason. You're doing it because you want to you want to be a member of the British Special Forces, of the elite. And it's that prestige. And you're being kept awake all weekend. It's one weekend.
Was there a mantra, throughout your training that you would, speak to yourself to give yourself that confidence to keep yourself on the path? And when you'd get those negative thoughts coming up, was there anything that you would other than visualization?
So something that me and Nick actually used to do, I can't believe I'm saying this actually on the podcast, but something that me and Nick used to do actually, we had a little bit of a trigger, a bit of a trigger word, to be honest, from when we very first started doing some kind of training. And Nick, I guess, Nick kind of thought of this, but every time he said it, it was at like, we'd been doing a physical training session for probably 2 or 3 hours, and it was like in the last 10 minutes where I felt like I literally had nothing left to give, and he'd say this word, and it just like unleashed something, in the mind, and it just went. I won't say what that word is, because it's quite personal to me, but it just whenever this thing was said, and I get to a point where I was able to keep it locked away in a box in my mind, and just open it when I needed it. If that makes sense.
Yeah, of course. Definitely. Of course. There's always that something that is pushing us forwards, and something that we can count on to keep us moving. Definitely.
That's fantastic. And you were saying to me and Dan earlier about also you had an element where you had to explain. I think a high-ranking officer came to the camp and you had to explain a real technical piece of equipment. Do you want to talk us through that?
Yeah, I mean, I like to think I'm quite humble, to be honest. So sometimes it's quite. I don't necessarily find it easy to talk about some of the stuff that I've done. You know, I always been taught to kind of be the grey man.
Yeah.
And I guess kind of just blending with everybody else. But yeah, so on our selection program, I remember we had a visit from some high-ranking officers that were just kind of visiting and wanting to know what we were up to.
Yeah.
And one of the directing staff asked me to brief these high-ranking officers for kind of 10 minutes. And at the time, I was absolutely like crapping myself, like little Private Blunston. Like I've got to brief these like generals.
Yeah.
It's like fucking hell. It's like, what the hell am I doing here? That was then when I thought, this is not bloody for me. Yeah. But anyway, I kind of quickly got my head around what I was going to say, and I did the presentation, and I guess it went really well, and kind of so much so that at the end of the presentation, my directing staff was kind of stood to the left of me, and the generals were stood to the other side, and it turned out that the generals was so like impressed with what I'd said that they actually thought, they didn't realise that I was a student. They thought I was a member of the directing staff. Yeah. Until a member of the directing staff said to me, "Would you like to introduce yourself, Mr. Blunston, and tell them where you're from?" Yeah. And then I was like, "I'm Private Blunston from 1st Battalion, the Parachute Regiment," and their jaws just were like, "Oh my God, we didn't realise you were a student. We thought you were one of the directing staff." And I ended up, fortunately getting being awarded as top student on the whole of my selection program out of the countless kind of people who started. Yeah. And I was given the award of top student, and I always think back to that was probably one of the key elements that I guess
kept you going.
Got me to that top student. To be honest, yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. So you were talking about escape and evasion, and then interrogation. Could you take us through what happens when you're getting interrogated, when you finally get caught?
So escape and evasion and interrogation, it's effectively the two elements of the same phase. You escape and evasion, you're kind of pushed out into the field in your little team for kind of 5 days with very little food and water, and you've got to make checkpoints every night, but you've got a kind of crazed hunter force on your case who are also military guys. And on mine, I got, as I said, I got grabbed, but then you go into the interrogation element of it, and you put into numerous stress positions, and you're given the white noise. White noise is constantly played, like the crackling of a TV or the crackling of a radio. That's white noise, basically. That's just constantly played whilst you're in various stress positions.
And are you just in a house with other people, or?
Well, you've got a hood over your head. Yeah. Or goggles on, so you don't really know who's. You don't know who's around you. No one's talking. All you can hear is white noise, and every now and again, if you kind of relax from a stress position, there'll be somebody who comes around and puts you back in that stress position. So, for example, if you're sat down on your backside with your legs crossed, and you start kind of slouching forward, somebody will come behind you and put their knee in between your shoulder blades and push your shoulder blades back. Yeah. Obviously, you've been on the run for 5 days. You've hardly had any sleep. You've hardly had any food, any water. Yeah. And you're shoved in, and you're getting knocked about quite a bit, to be honest, in the interrogation phases. They don't.
Not the type of massage you want.
No, certainly not. They're not shy with you. Yeah. They certainly manhandle you quite a bit. Yeah. I mean, so one of the ones that brings back memories for me was before my hood before I got led into a room, and got told to kneel down, and I put my head onto something, and I didn't know what it was at the time, and they started rubbing something on the back of my neck, before they'd even said anything to me, and then they pulled my hood off and started asking me questions. Quite calm, but they were still rubbing something on the back of my neck, and it was an axe. It was a rusty axe that they were rubbing on the back of my neck for about half an hour, whilst halfway through this, all the way through this interrogation, trying to get information out of me, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And looking back now, it's pretty crazy.
Wasn't quite a coffee and a chat.
Would you say that was the most intense interrogations?
No.
No,
definitely not. So one of the last ones that I did, I walked into got guided into a room. Guy took my mask off. In fact, there were a couple. So I'll go for one first. One guy took my mask off, and then simultaneously a guy gave me a backhander to the stomach, and another guy threw a glass of water in my face. And they're like literally 3 guys screaming and shouting at you, like dribble coming out of their mouths like they're like ravaged dogs, screaming and shouting at you, like roughing you around. And that's certainly shock.
Yeah, a shock to the system.
But the one that hit home the most was quite a calm guy, and he basically, as soon as he started speaking to me, he said, "I know all about your dad." He says, "I know your dad's dead," and he said, "I know that your dad killed himself because he was so disappointed in you." And even like looking back to it now, I'm like, bloody hell, I can't believe he was saying that. This, my dad had only died, had only died 6 months earlier. And it's just constant mind games that they're trying to play with you. For the whole of the interrogation phase of kind of 30 odd 45 minutes, possibly an hour, I don't know. He was trying to tell me and trying to convince me that my dad had like killed himself because he was so disappointed in me. And I was, it was still the emotions were still ridiculously raw at that point. It was bloody 6 months, and this is the escape and evasion phase happens after about approximately the midway point of selection. Halfway through, so it'd probably been 9 months then. But the sleep deprivation, the lack of food and drink and water,
must have been incredibly tough.
Yeah, it was.
And I remember been emotional.
I remember being standing there, with my fists like clenched, wanting to literally swing for the guy. I was trying to say to him like, no, trying to remain as calm as possible. You can't lash out.
Yeah,
you can't lash out at all. That interrogation ended, but fortunately that was pretty much right at one of the last interrogations, and right at the end, when it's all over, you basically get debriefed by somebody who's effectively done your worst interrogation, and this guy debriefed me, and he walked into the room, and we had a fucking big hug, to be honest. And he was like, "I'm really sorry that I had to do that," but he said my old man died 3 months ago. And there was definitely tears from both of us,
of course,
during that. Like it was pretty intense.
Yeah, I bet that was a very intense situation.
Yeah, pretty intense. But that in a really weird way, throughout the whole of the selection program, the visualization, but also my dad wanting me.
His presence was there.
Oh God, I heard him constantly. It was like a constant guide of, I could hear him every day telling me exactly what to do, like telling me how proud he was and all the rest of it, and that meant that like failure was not, I hate the cliche that failure is not an option, but it was not even, it wasn't there. It was just not even apparent in my mind. It was just him, saying keep going, you're doing all right.
Yeah,
and that was honestly, I'm a firm believer that was one of that was the big reason that just kept pushing me, and kind of meant that when others were really struggling, I was just like, well, just felt like I
It's
was.
amazing.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, it wasn't easy.
Yeah.
It wasn't easy by any stretch of the imagination. But
Well, saying it wasn't easy, what for you was the most difficult part of training?
the most difficult part of training for me, I guess, because as I've said, I wasn't the strongest, I wasn't the most physically robust person.
Mm-hmm.
I really did used to shy away from physical training and anything that involved kind of your own body strength.
Yeah.
So for me, that was probably one of the most challenging elements of it for me. The physicality of it, But I like to think what I lacked there, I made up for in my mindset. And don't get me wrong, not saying I was weak at the time by any stretch of the imagination, but I certainly was nowhere near the strongest.
Yeah.
I used to feel quite embarrassed sometimes about how weak I felt or perceived myself to be compared to the other guys there.
Yeah.
And these bigger guys or fitter guys that you'd deem to be fitter around you, was there any of them that were dropping off and you were still there? Did that have an effect on your mindset or how you were feeling?
Yeah. You, when you first turn up on kind of the first day, everyone starts kind of sizing each other up.
Yeah.
You see some big guys there, and you see some quite skinny guys, and you instantly look at the big guys and you think, well, they're going to pass.
Yeah.
But funnily enough, at the end, they're generally not there.
Yeah.
They've gone. But when you start seeing some big guys drop out, it starts playing mind games with you, and you think, well, they're stronger than me.
Mm-hmm.
They're fitter than me. Boy, I don't deserve to be here. I must be fluking it, or must be pot luck, or or I'm gonna be kicked out on the next phase kind of thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But being part of the Special Forces is certainly not about physical capabilities.
Yeah.
Really, it's much more about your mindset.
Yeah.
Much more about your mindset.
Definitely.
So with all of that, Steve, when you finally passed, can you describe what it felt like? You finally got through. How did it feel for yourself?
I guess it was pretty awesome, to be honest. But that's then when you really know that's only when you pass the course.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? You've then actually got to do the job that's expected of you.
Yeah.
And deploying operations with everyone else who's in the Special Forces.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got it. Life doesn't actually really get easier by any stretch of the imagination, because more is expected of you. So you've got to up your game even further,
of course,
because you're constantly being watched.
Mm-hmm.
And the motto, pain is temporary, pride is forever. Did you use that a lot?
Definitely.
Is that synonymous with Special
Definitely,
Forces?
because it's like kind of what we were kind of saying earlier. I often make kind of not snap decisions, but decisions based on stories that I want to tell when I'm older in life, or when I'm effectively on dare I say it, my deathbed.
Yeah.
I want to look back and think, well, what have I achieved? And if bloody hell, if struggling like crazy for a weekend means that I end up doing something better with my life, or struggling like crazy for 6 months means that for the rest of my life I can call myself Special Forces or ex-Special Forces, then it's only bloody 6 months.
It's worth it. Right?
Yeah.
It's a 6 month course that you've then got that pride and prestige to use for the rest of your life. It's 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
And do you think that the experience changed your perspective on failure, and showed that mostly all obstacles or challenges could or can be, and you did overcome them?
Yeah, I guess I started to at that time. I guess I felt largely, dare I say it, indestructible. I was kind of in my mid-20s, and I felt like there wasn't a lot that could touch me. I felt so mentally strong. It was ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah, of course. And when you were deployed, on situations, whether that was in Afghanistan, Africa, or anywhere that you were, out at war or on operation, did you ever have to I know you said you had a strong mindset. Was there any times that you questioned that or had to convince yourself that you can do this? You know, was there any times where you were being fired upon? You know,
Yeah.
anything where you questioned?
So, to be honest, when you're a trained soldier, so for example, a police officer, you train to be a police officer, and then every day in, day out, you're being a police officer. You know, you're doing your job.
Yeah.
Whereas for a soldier, for example, like a parachute regiment soldier, you know, you're trained to fight, but you do very little fighting.
Yeah.
Like a fractional amount of fighting, a tiny little bit of it.
Yeah.
So when it actually gets to that element of fighting, I remember the first time I was fired at. Me and my friend, we were high-fiving each other.
Yeah.
Dare I say it? You know that because we've been training for this moment for a bloody long time and gone through some quite grueling training, and you're almost in euphoria.
Yeah.
You know, you're thinking, bloody hell, this is actually happening now. You know, you've got dust kind of laying all around, you know, flying all around you, landing on top of your helmets, and you're like, yeah, you know, this is what we've been trained to do. You're almost high-fiving each other. But, you know, don't get me wrong, there's certainly been quite challenging times on other operations where, you know, you've been not quite on your own, but pretty much on your own, without any real mutual support, and you know, when things start going wrong, that's when you're really starting to question what on earth am I doing here?
Yeah.
But it's that visualization again, and the kind of the mindset. I mean, when a lot of soldiers, I'm sure, will say the same thing as what I'm about to say, but when you're on tour, life is easy. As in, you have you to think about, the guys around you, and your weapon. When you're at home, that's when all the baggage comes along with it, like bills, relationships, partners.
Yeah.
And you also weren't you were in firefights that lasted a period of time.
Yeah, yeah. Some of them, you know, they last for, you know, they're generally not exactly short things.
Yeah.
You know, when you're in contact with kind of, you know, enemy fighters, they're hours and up on end.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, I think we've spoke quite a few times about some that, you know, go on plus of 6 hours. You know, and you finish it and you realise that you've literally not had anything to eat or drink, and you are absolutely knackered. Yeah.
Does that affect your focus?
It can't.
Yeah.
It can't. You know, the training that you do, it pushes you so much that it can't really affect your focus. I mean, don't get me wrong. You know, we're all human. We're not. You know, they're certainly not gods by any stretch of the imagination whatsoever. But you just the way that you're taught in the military is that when, you know, they push you to your boundaries.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, they do keep going, but it's the guys around you who keep going, who keep you going as well. You know, and you've always trying to remain professional.
Yeah. And you'd experienced, you know, all of that grueling training, and by the end of it, when you are in a firefight, all those soldiers around you, you know, those special forces soldiers or whoever, they've been through exactly the same grueling training, so you kind of know that they're not going to give up. That
that, you know,
it's that camaraderie.
Yeah, it's a big bond, big bond. And although, you know, there's loads of guys who I've served with who I haven't spoke to or seen in years, I know, for example, if I walked out of here and I saw them on the street straight away, you would go for a beer, and as if, you know, we were still absolutely best mates.
Yeah.
You know, there's no, and that is like, you know, just the way it is.
Is that the sort of catch-22? Because obviously when you leave the military, there's that bond, camaraderie, but when you go into civvy street or civilian life, how did that affect your sort of personal life, relationships, and even possibly your mental health?
Yeah. So I left the military in 2015, and I basically got medically discharged for an injury doing the most silliest of things. And I ended up slipping a disc in my back and got nerve damage, and I had rehab for the best part of 12 months, and when I started to realise that this probably isn't actually going to get better, I took an absolute spiral.
Yeah.
You know, I thought, you know, my career's over. you know, I've joined the parachute regiment and then joined the special forces, and you know, I was in my like my late 20s, and all of a sudden I've been told I'm not fit enough to do the job that I've spent all these years training to do anymore.
Yeah.
And not really long that I'd only passed kind of, you know, 3 years earlier. You know, I was still really quite new to it, to be honest.
Yeah.
So for me, I certainly remember a number of times where I spoke with my partner Leanne, and I was really struggling with the loss of identity, the complete loss of identity, thinking, what on earth am I going to do when I leave?
Yeah.
When I leave the military, you know, that's all I ever, not all I ever knew, but that was who I was.
Your identity.
You know, that was the prestige I'd you know, all those grueling tasks that you're asked to do, you know, that I didn't expect to leave.
Yeah.
You know,
It's
before
the
that
same.
time, you know. So yeah, I certainly struggled for probably the best part of a year, but then just as I was leaving, I actually saw a Facebook post from one of my other ex-military friends for a disaster response charity,
Yeah.
who were recruiting for somebody who actually had somebody who was of my trade,
Yeah.
right at the time when I was leaving, which, to be honest, was,
Fate.
well, I guess it was, yeah.
Yeah.
I guess it was.
Right, Steve. So again, with obviously Rescue Global, how challenging actually was it? You know, within that, was the transferable skills from the military into this new role?
Yeah. So, obviously a lot of the guys who worked for the charity and were in your small team were all ex-military as well. So, you know, the camaraderie was still there. It was an awesome stepping stone to leaving the army. To be honest, it felt like another wing of the military for me. I'm so grateful for that, you know, because I think I would have really struggled and been lost if I didn't have that opportunity. But you know, we did some pretty cool stuff, to be honest. You know, kind of every week we got paid to, you know, it was a full-time gig, full-time job, you know, paid quite well. But every week we got paid to go down to our local drop zone, Headcorn in Kent, and, you know, kind of get as many parachute jumps in as we could, because that was one of our capabilities as well, and obviously that was a skill that I had from the military.
Yeah.
But we deployed to the Caribbean in 2018 in response to quite a few hurricanes, and that was quite an experience, quite an eye-opening experience for me, because I'd never really been to a proper disaster area, you know, where you're going you're going over there, you know, in very quick response. And I think we got over there within a few days,
So
or
it's still
possibly
fresh.
a week. Oh, very, very fresh.
Yeah.
We went to areas where they hadn't seen any outsiders. You know, we the whole point of what we were doing is we would get over there very quickly. That's why we effectively had a parachuting capability. We wanted to be effectively first guys on the ground, and get that information, and effectively get it sent back. And that was basically my job. You know, comms, sending it back, because we'd go to areas where they'd lost all internet reception, they'd lost all mobile phone reception. So yeah, one of the areas that we responded to was Dominica in the Caribbean.
But inhospitable in the jungle.
Oh yeah, I'd never done the jungle before whilst I was in the military. And yeah, for somebody who's always carried a little bit of excess timber, it wasn't you know, my natural habitat, that's for sure.
I take it was humid, was it? Very hot?
Oh god, horrible. Probably one of the most challenging physical tasks I've ever had to do, on a particular day when we were asked to survey power lines for the island's electricity company, trying to help get the power back online. So in the island of Dominica, there's 3 really big mountains, and just so happens that the main island's power lines go over these 3 big mountains, and normally there'd be a really nice, pleasant tourist walk. That's a couple of hours. It's not very long. It's a couple of K. But after 3 hurricanes, there was no path. No path whatsoever. You know, there'd been several avalanches. You were having to use machetes to cut through the bush, and also try to find these power lines, which basically been completely obliterated. You know, we got there and we'd found out that, you know, there was really not much to survey.
Yeah.
Was it? I take it it was rewarding. Like when you met the people,
Oh, yeah.
were they happy to
Yeah,
to,
yeah.
to see you?
Incredibly rewarding. Absolutely incredibly rewarding. So some of the things that we were doing, you know, we'd go around to little communities, we'd gather information on what kind of meds they needed. You know, we weren't ever really able to help individual people.
Yeah.
We helped communities.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know, we were
Fantastic.
a small group of guys who had a big impact.
Yeah.
So, for example, we'd go to a village, find out what medication they needed, what you know, if they needed nappies or food, and we'd got it down to being able to send that information back to America.
Yeah.
And within 36 hours, we'd have that aid land in Dominica and get it distributed to the communities that needed it. So that's really quick.
Yeah.
36 hours is very, very quick.
Fast turnaround, isn't
So
it?
that, and you know, you're getting thanked by the people who asked for it only a day and a half earlier.
Yeah. I mean, I know you say it was pushing your boundaries and it was intense, but I bet you got a real sense of achievement.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
when you got back of an evening.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
you thought
yeah.
about all those people that
I mean,
you'd.
don't get me wrong. You know, it was awesome. It was absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you know, you can't help but think, well, and by this point, you know, I'd got married to Leanne, my wife, and we had a little boy at home. So although you're helping lots of other people, you know, when we deployed over to the Caribbean, we were told we were only going to be 2 weeks.
Yeah.
We didn't get home for 10 weeks.
Crikey.
I bet that was putting some pressure.
That
on
was a phenomenal amount of pressure on us, on the
Couple of months,
relationship.
you. Mhm.
So on that note, you know, one of the points here was, you know, what we're talking about now is, did the work have a massive implications
Yeah,
on
of course it
family
did.
life? And also, you were doing a masters, weren't you, at the time?
Yeah. So one of the prerequisites to me getting the job at Rescue Global, I said to them, you know, the military do look after you when you leave.
Yeah.
And I decided, well, or realised, I guess, well, I haven't really got any qualifications, so I thought, well, I'll look to go to university and try to get myself a degree.
Yeah.
Not really knowing what I wanted to do, but I guess I took the traditional route that a load of ex-forces guys do. And I went down the kind of security management role, but I thought, well, I'll go for a master's if I can.
Yeah.
So yeah, one of the kind of prerequisites to me joining Rescue Global was that they helped to facilitate time for me to get this master's degree. And I actually remember whilst I was over in the Caribbean, I cheekily logged into my university online portal to find out what final qualification, what final level what final grade I'd got at the end, right at the end of my masters whilst I was deployed.
So how hard was that? You know, being
Balancing
rescue
it.
response,
Yeah,
your relationship's strained, and you're trying to do a masters. You know, how did you find the balance? Because that's a massive one for everybody in our society today.
I guess I'd got to a point, you know, where I couldn't sit still. I'd realised that I'd realised that I'm the kind of person now who's just going to constantly want to push myself and constantly push boundaries. You know, I don't like just kind of sitting down and doing the average, you know, the everyday kind of go to work 9 to 5, come back home, you know, have your dinner, you watch a bit of TV, and you kind of that whole rinse and repeat.
Yeah.
So for me, I guess I just wanted more. I knew that the charity wasn't necessarily going to last forever, so I thought, well, right now is a perfect opportunity to get some qualifications. So yeah, I went to university and got that master's degree.
Yes.
And then not long after that deployment to the Caribbean, because, you know, having quite a young family, you know, that deployment certainly kind of took its toll on me.
Yeah.
So decided to leave and get a relatively normal corporate job with my master's degree. That was just not for me. Oh, it was horrible.
Didn't enjoy
How long did that last?
2 months.
All that.
2 months. Yeah, but you know, I didn't see it as a failure, because for me, getting the degree wasn't only just about getting a job.
Yeah.
It was about proving to myself
That you could
that
cut
I
it
could
and see
do
the
this,
street,
Yeah.
that I could get a qualification, that
Yeah.
I was adaptable.
Yeah.
Of course.
That was for me like the biggest the reason as to why I did it. So I knew then that regardless of whichever way I wanted to go, I was adaptable.
Yeah.
I could mold myself to whichever career I decided to do.
And then you've gone into property development, which you're doing now.
Yeah.
And how are you finding that?
So I guess it's a bit of a weird kind of career transition, to be honest. I mean, I got into property whilst I was in the military, to be honest.
Yeah.
And I guess I just kind of got a little bit lucky with some purchases at the end of the recession. And I always property had done quite well for me, to be honest, and it was always something that I wanted to further progress, but I didn't really know how. And in 2018, 2019, decided to do a little bit of training in it after my short corporate career didn't really go, or didn't really feel right for me. I thought, well, now's a good time to give this a go. So I went on a 12-month mentorship with, I think, kind of 60 others. And at the end of that 12-month mentorship, I'd done quite well, and was I guess awarded or nominated as one of the top 5 performers of that course, because of the kind of projects that you'd purchased or acquired during that time period of property, basically.
So that's really showing that you can adapt. You've gone from one thing to completely the other.
I guess I've realised quite a lot about myself, that when I put my mind to something, I give everything. And I mean, I literally give it absolutely everything.
Failure isn't an option.
But sometimes that's not. I guess I'm also learning that that's not always the best way. I've got a family. Don't get me wrong. It's not as if I completely dismiss my family by any stretch of the imagination. But I put off every other element of my social life until if I put my mind to something, I put my mind to it. And everything else really kind of just gets put to the side. So don't get me wrong, we're always learning, aren't we? I'm certainly by no stretch of the imagination where I want to be at all, both physically, both kind of mentally and kind of financially.
So was within that property at the moment, that business, how are you pushing yourself and those past military experiences and with Rescue Global? Are you using those skills and transferring that to what you're actually doing at the moment?
Yeah. So I guess if it wasn't for some of my military experience, I probably wouldn't be taking some of the calculated risks that I've decided to take since I've been investing in property. Don't get me wrong, they're not necessarily big risks. They are definitely calculated risks. That's something I like to kind of take pride in. But I guess I'm certainly pushing mental boundaries where and doing things that 24 months ago or 12 months ago I certainly would never have imagined that I would be doing now. I think in the last 9 months now, we've raised privately nearing £500,000 worth of private finance. And looking back, 12 months ago, if you told me that, I would have laughed about it. But I guess I've just got it in my mind now that I'm just going to constantly be chasing the next thing. I don't want to settle with where I am. Don't get me wrong. I'm not some crazed individual, but I just always looking for that next challenge, I guess.
And with that new challenge, is that bringing you new anxieties and taking you out of the comfort zone and bringing that different kind of stress?
It's only really, I'd probably say it's been since I've left the military that anxiety and has been like quite a key thing, really. And it's probably maybe down to that kind of the loss of identity, I guess. But
because you're on your own, aren't you? You haven't got the support around you as such, like a troop.
Yeah, when you're in the military, you're a tiny little cog in a big machine. You're looked after. You really are. You're looked after, and then when you get into almost, I guess, the real world, there's a lot more kind of constraints put on you. So the anxiety is certainly a big thing. Dealing with big figures, big projects. I put a lot of pressure on myself.
Yeah.
Because as I've said, when I put my mind to it, it's going to work. I put every element of every ounce of energy that I've got into it, I guess.
you said you're taking calculated risks. You're not just feeling anxious and feeling stressed and just pushing forward because these risks are calculated and you know what you want to get from
valid
that.
Reasons, aren't
they? They are, and it's interesting because I guess I always like to, as I've said, I like to push myself quite a bit. But one of the things that I always see is, there's a lot of people out there who, I guess I've done quite a lot, to be honest, in the last kind of 10 to 15 years. I guess I've done quite a lot more than the norm, I guess, But to me, it's the norm. It's kind of what I've known.
Yeah.
But I guess to some, it's probably sounds a bit, crazy or something like that. But it's a quote that became really quite familiar with. Is if you rest, you rust.
Yeah, of course.
And I really like to just keep pushing yourself, keep pushing boundaries. Because we're not on this earth forever.
Yeah.
And I think it's ingrained into a lot of society these days to just be happy with
what you've got.
Mediocre.
Yeah.
I speak to a lot of people all the time who are always blame other people for where they are in their life at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good point. That is.
Yeah.
It's almost the blame game, isn't it? People pointing at other people saying, this relationship's failed because of that person or that, and my family or whatever it is.
Oh God, it's all about responsibility, isn't it? You got to take responsibility for where you are right now. You can't blame it on other people, can you?
Of course,
no.
of course.
And I guess you found that you love seeking new challenges.
Yeah.
And that you're adaptable and you're flexible to anything that's in your way, as it were.
I guess so. As I say, I like to think I'm pretty humble, to be honest, and hope that's how I've come across.
Yeah, of course.
I like to think I'm pretty humble with it all.
What you said there really, resonated with me. Take responsibility, because if we don't take responsibility, how do we ever get anywhere? Are you willing to take responsibility if something goes right? You've got to be willing to take responsibility when something's gone wrong, negative, if it's positive or negative. Because we've got to learn, from our mistakes, but also the good things that we've achieved.
Yeah.
And I think possibly you're showing that again in society. We're brought up to, we've got to succeed. You can't have failure, but without failure, you're not going to learn anything.
No. Of course, there's failures. There's failures all the time, and I've failed at things a lot. But I guess don't like to call them failures. It's a challenge. It's a lesson. It's not a failure. You adapt, and I don't want to say you adapt and you overcome, because again that sounds too cliche. But you mould your mindset into. It's not a failure. It's just something that's happened, and you've overcome it.
Yeah, and you're taking the feedback from that, and then you go again.
Use it as it's a lesson.
Yeah.
But I guess the key thing for me, I think, is you got to take action. You got to take responsibility for your actions. If you're not happy with where you are, it's down. Then you can do something about it.
So it's been an amazing podcast, and it's been amazing to have you on.
Awesome.
But to conclude, are there like 2 or 3 tips that you can give the listeners at home that are trying to overcome their own challenges? Because we've got them. We've all got them, haven't we?
We certainly have, and I am, by any stretch of the imagination, there as or where I want to be. I'm learning constantly. So I guess a couple of things that I personally think are, what the first one, and this is one that I always have to remind myself of, is they're just, things are never as bad as they seem. Right there and then, the worst thing has happened, or what feels like the worst thing has happened, but guaranteed tomorrow or the week after, it's not that bad.
Yeah.
Do you know? Like you'll probably laugh about it in a year or two's time. It will not have had that much of a big impact on your life. And obviously right at right at the time when my father passed away, of course, it was horrendous. It had such a big impact on me and my brother and sisters at the time.
Yeah.
But it happened.
Yeah.
It happened. I didn't let it. You can't let it have a negative impact on you.
Yeah.
Let it twist it around and turn it into, make it powerful
Well, I think
for
you did, didn't you? You used it as a pivotal moment.
I like to think so. But I only did it as well because my dad had said so many things to me that I was able to use as fuel in the background.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think the first one for me is probably, the things are never as bad as it seems. You take a step back, have a look outside of the box, and try to twist it around and use that negative in another way.
So change your perspective.
Definitely, all about perspective, mate. Yeah. And I guess the second one for me, it's something that's, I guess, relatively new for me, but something I've found really powerful over the last kind of couple of years is about like journaling and setting goals.
Okay.
When I was in the military, I certainly would never have imagined myself journaling, to be honest.
Yeah.
But certainly since kind of getting into my doing my masters and I guess working for myself,
Yeah.
I've realised how powerful journaling and journaling really is, and setting yourself 3-month and 12-monthly goals, and then also looking back, because some of I remember myself and my wife Leanne, we did this. We set some goals about 16 months ago, and we looked back, only a few months ago, and I think we ticked like four out of the 5 of them off, and some of them
fantastic.
were big goals, big goals.
And do you think it gives you, it's going to give you the direction? Because I know you said that you didn't journal when you were in the military, because you said you were a small cog in a massive machine.
Yeah.
They're almost telling you what to do.
Exactly. You almost, I don't want to say you don't need to do it, but a lot of your thought processes are done for you.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're in, I guess the I don't want to say the real world, but when you're out there doing it on your own, it is you on your own.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of where the whole kind of taking responsibility for your actions really comes into it, and I think that's why the journaling is really good. I mean, I think I've mentioned to you guys a few times about a journal that I use called Best Self Journal. And that for me has been an absolute game changer. It's been incredibly powerful tool, and I think probably the last one for me is I briefly touched on it. And I have really pinched it from one of my friends, but it is something that I do absolutely love. But if it's called, it's a bit of a mantra. If you rest, you rust. Just keep pushing.
Brilliant.
If you're not happy with where you are right now, then do something about it.
Take action.
You can do something about it. But you got the first element of that really is about taking responsibility and knowing that you can. You can do something about it,
Of course. Brilliant. Thank you.
Thanks
for coming on.
Cheers.
Cheers, guys. I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Enjoyed that.
Brilliant.